This program is brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
Growing up, most of us were brought up in very traditional settings where the nuclear family unit was very close-knit with the extended family and other members of the immediate community. Those of us who did not grow up in our home villages, school holidays and sometimes long weekends meant that our parents had to send us to our grandparents, where we spent most of our days at the farm, the cattle post, or just within the confines of our home villages. Days for children meant waking up to go play with cousins and other friends. Most of the time, the responsibility of knowing where the children were lay with all of the older members of that particular community, where the adage, "a child is raised by a village," took literal meaning. In the last 2 decades or so, there has been an increasing reprise of Nobel Prize-winning economists, Fortune 500 CEOs, and other business and economic leaders calling for the increase in public investment in early childhood. This sudden call is compelled by research findings that increasingly suggest that laying a strong foundation in early childhood by engaging kids in a range of early interventions is important. This is because these programs can successfully put children on the path towards positive development, preventing poor outcomes in adulthood. The United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund states that, according to science, early child development is critical and marks a child for life, and young children who are well nurtured do better in school and develop the necessary skills to compete in a global economy. Some of these initiatives and programs are usually offered at most advanced daycare centers, but what of the children whose parents cannot afford daycare, or the parent who wants to be involved in that child's life-changing development? How do they best deal with that child? But most importantly, why this sudden call for this structured way of raising children? We're here with behavior analyst Maleshwane Maucho, who speaks to us about this subject in depth.
With more and more scientific studies being done and a lot more knowledge of issues that children have, we've had more knowledge and awareness of certain psychological issues and behavior and learning issues that children now have because of how we've kind of changed the way that we've been parenting. A lot of parents have started to adopt Western ways of parenting, which they don't necessarily, they're not necessarily adopting those ways of parenting, exactly knowing how it's done. And then we're also moving away from our culture where we had a very organic way of raising our children. So what's now happening is that our parents are really, really confused in terms of how they're parenting, and the children are even more confused because they're being led by somebody who doesn't even know what they're doing correctly. In the past, we had uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts who were there to kind of support parents during the parenting journey. And now we no longer have that. So we're discovering that we're getting more cases of developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, behavioral and psychological issues with our children. In other countries where they are a little bit more advanced scientifically, such as the Scandinavian countries, a teacher who teaches early childhood is paid more than a doctor, because they see that investing in a child in earlier years is extremely important. For instance, I think it's in Sweden where just raising a child who's your typical child will cost the government about $250,000 from the moment they're in reception to Form 5. But if you then have a child who hasn't gotten that proper foundation when they're younger, then you take that amount and you triple it to close enough to $1 million. So it's really, really important for our economy for us to really invest a lot more in early childhood intervention. And then also it's just in terms of like productivity. You know, parents are constantly calling out of work to go check to go see if a child is doing well at school, to make sure that, you know, if if a child has had problems with the law or with the school system, that they're handling that. So it's very multifaceted in terms of like the impact that a child who's not well educated and not enough interventions have done when they're younger, the impact is quite multifaceted. I think one thing that we need to do is just maybe take a step back and really introspect and look at how our culture was able to raise the Sekitimile Masire, the Mohayes and the Mandelas. We really need to take a step back and look at how our tradition we raise their kids, and then be able to then use some of those Western ways of good parenting, but contextualizing it within our culture, improving on what we had already. I think the problem is that we were focusing only on the Western way of raising a child without looking at our own ways that have been successful in the past.
So for the parent who's sitting at home, how should they best deal with their children? Is it an issue of, kingwana, or kingwana, but let me guide them?
We have to guide, but we need to know how to guide. As a parent, you need to be more authoritarian in how you lead your children. You need to be able to be more open, have an open door policy, be open to a child coming and complaining and asking you questions and explaining things, and then taking the time to be mindful about literally sitting and teaching them the rules that you would like, or the expectations that you want to put on them. So it's very, very important for us when we're parenting to be mindful of how we talk to our children, how we behave.
Malashona, what is it about the early years of a child's life that is so important to the brain's development that, if not handled delicately, can lead to poor outcomes in adulthood?
The early years are the foundation in terms of a child's development. They're where they learn their language skills, where they learn their social skills, how to deal with people, where they learn the initial pre-academic skills that they will then use after 6 years old and into school. And if we do not handle those correctly, we'll have these issues that we're now seeing in schools. We're seeing children who have issues with behavior. We have children who are dropping out of school. We have children who cannot read at standard 5, standard 6. We have children who are just confused, don't really know what's happening. And that is part of what could have been avoided if we had really invested in well-trained teachers in supporting parents on how to parent and how to do it organically, like I said earlier on, looking at a child's development. A lot of children nowadays actually go to school a lot earlier than they should. You'll have a child in school at 6 months or a year old, and what then happens is that they don't get that quality time where they could be climbing trees and running and playing with soil, and they get more the TV time or sitting time at a desk, and those are things that really impact on their development.
Speaking of delicacy or delicately dealing with children, is there such a thing as traumatizing children? Or, is that our perception, especially when we're trying to make them aware of their mistakes?
Yes, there is. My rule of thumb is that you should talk to a child the way that you would want somebody to talk to you. Treat them with respect, treat them with humility. Do not use your words as a weapon, but use your words as a way of correcting a mistake that a child has made. Children learn through making mistakes, and they make a lot of mistakes. And it's up to the parent to kind of take a step back and be able to have the skill set to know that this is my child learning, and then taking time outside of the mistakes that a child makes and teaching them and modeling and through play and role playing on what is the right thing to do. Within my field as a behavior analyst, we say, we use a phrase called catch them being good. If you catch them being good, you're more likely to reinforce, when you reinforce a behavior, actually, let me put it this way, when you reinforce a behavior, it increases. So when you catch your child doing good things, say it. you have to constantly be telling them you're doing really, really good, doing that. And then as it becomes part of their behaviors of doing the good things, then what you then go on and do is that you choose other more newer behaviors. So remember when I said you have to be mindful? So you have to practice mindfulness there, that first I'm going to teach this skill, and then I'm going to teach the next skill, then I'm going to teach another skill. And then you'll find out that 80 to 90% of the time, your child is doing a great job. They're sitting nicely next to their sister or brother, and they're just having a lot of fun. But the minute they do something wrong, you scream at them. And then what happens sometimes is that, well, I only get attention when I'm doing something wrong, so I'm going to do more wrong things. So you'll see a child constantly doing wrong things, so you can scream at them. So what you've basically taught them is that my attention is contingent on your misbehaving.